My people, in today's video I'm going to give you 7 tips so that you can make a haircut much easier. So pay close attention. Number 1 is to clean the machines well before making the cut. If you want to make the cut much easier, you have to first clean the machines with the brush and then lubricate them. This will make the blades of the machines much looser, and when we are lowering and raising the lever of the machine, it will be much smoother and much easier. Tip number 2 is that you have to comb your hair well or wash it before doing the fade. When you wash your hair, you will be able to make the fade much easier since the hair will be much looser. Apart from that, when we are passing the machine and we make the spaces of the guides, you will be able to pass the machine much smoother than if you do not wash your hair. Tip number 3 is to mark the cut first on both sides of the head and then do the fade. This point is also very important to do if you want to make the cut much easier, since if you first mark the cut on one side and you start to do the fade on that same side, when you go to fade the other side, you will not have the reference of where you started the cut. And another thing that I recommend you do that is super important is that when you mark the cut, do not mark it totally straight, but in the back part mark it in a fall so that the cut looks much better. In all the tutorials I'm going to tell you that the back part marks it in a fall so that you take it into account. Number 4, you have to start the cut lower than usual. If you are at least just learning to cut hair and you are going to do a mid fade, you already know that the mid fade goes from the middle of the head. Then what you have to do is start the cut 1 centimeter lower. You start the cut 1 centimeter lower. You mark both sides of the head as I mentioned before, and from there you start to do the fade. If you do that, you will have more space to do the fade, and therefore you will have more margin of error in case you make a mistake doing a cord. Tip number 5 is to make the spaces of the guides large. For example, we are going to mark the cut lower than usual. As I mentioned before, we mark it very low and we are no longer going to make the space of 1 centimeter as I always tell you, but we are going to make it of 1.5 centimeters or 2 centimeters. We mark the normal cut, and when we are going to make the space of the high zero, instead of making the space of 1 centimeter, we are going to make it larger this way. You will see the lines that you are creating much more clearly, and therefore you will erase it much easier. Tip number 6 is to pass the razor or the razor after doing the fade. If you are a person who is already starting to make cuts with the razor or with the razor, then I recommend that you first mark the cut as I have already been explaining to you. Then you do the normal fade, and finally you pass the razor or the razor. But super important, you have to leave a space of 0.5 centimeter between the trimmer line and the line of the blade, so that when you go to erase that line from the blade or the razor, you can erase that line much easier. Well, tip number 7, and one of the most important of all, is that if you are going to leave the top part low, either with the machine or with the scissors, do not leave that part for last, but before doing the fade, you start cutting that part, because if you leave the top part for last, when you finish doing the fade, it will not be the same. Because if you did the fade thinking that the top part was going to be that long, then the measurement of the sides will not be the same, and you will have to go over it with the machine again so that the cut is well connected. So this is something very important that you have to keep in mind if you want to make a much easier cut. Then my people, I hope these tips have been very helpful. Do not forget to like and subscribe.